Assalamualaikum and good day to Professor and all fellow friends. My name is Farah Farisha binti Mamak Kamil with metric number 305004. So we are from Group 4 and the other members will introduce themselves later. In this presentation, we will include introduction, historical background, major tenets, contribution of William Stanley Jevons, contributions of Anthony Augustine Cornut, and contributions of Francis Y. Cedro Edgeworth. We also will discuss about whom did the school benefit, how was the school valid, useful or correct in its time, which tenets of the school become lasting contribution, conclusion, and the last one, references. So here is our topic of discussion, which is the Marginalist School 5 major question and contributions of William Stanley Jevons, Anthony Augustine Cornut, and Francis Y. Edgeworth in developing the ideas of that school. Let me start with introduce the Marginalist School. The Marginalist School began in 1871 with the works of William Stanley Jevons and Karl Menger, who developed the idea of marginal utility. Before them, early thinkers like Anthony Augustine Cornut and Jules Dupuy had already contributed to marginal analysis. Later, this theory was further expanded by second-generation economists such as Francis Cedro Edgeworth and John Bates Clark. Over time, the Marginalist School became part of neoclassical economics. So, in this assignment, we will focus on the contributions of Cornut, Jevons, and Edgeworth in developing the ideas of this school. Next, I will explain about the historical background of the Marginalist School. First, we need to understand that economic ideas usually develop based on the problems faced during a particular time. Even after the Industrial Revolution, many serious economic and social problems were still not solved. For example, poverty was still widespread, even though productivity was increasing rapidly. At the same time, income and wealth were very unevenly distributed, which caused dissatisfaction among society. In addition, the economy experienced frequent business cycles, such as recessions, which create instability in people's lives. Because of these conditions, many rural workers migrate from rural areas to cities to find jobs. However, life in the city was very challenging. Workers had to face long working hours, unsafe and unhealthy working conditions, weak bargaining power, and also a lack of security, especially during old age. So overall, these problems created the need for new economic ideas and solutions. Moving on to the next slide, we look at how society responded to these problems and how the Marginalist School reacted. In 19th century Europe, three main solutions were proposed. First is socialism, which focused on equality. Second is labor unions, which aim to protect workers' rights. And third is government intervention, where the government regulates the economy and redistributes income. However, the marginalist economists did not fully agree with these approaches. Instead, they were more supportive of classical laissez-faire ideas, meaning they preferred minimal government intervention. They believed that the market system is capable of functioning efficiently on its own, and too much intervention could actually reduce efficiency. So, they support free market allocation and distribution. Even though they improve classical economic theory, especially in terms of analysis, they still believe that classical policy recommendations were generally suitable. So, in short, the Marginalist School brought new ideas in theory but still maintained similar policy views as the classical economists. So, there is 10 major tenets of the Marginalist School. These include focus on the margin, rational economic behavior, microeconomics emphasis, and the use of abstract and deductive methods. In addition, the marginalists emphasize pure computation, demand-oriented price theory, and subjective utility. They also adopted the equilibrium approach, merged land with capital goods, and supported minimal government involvement in the economy. So, the first one is focus on the margin. Marginalists focus on decision making at the margin, meaning small or incremental changes. Instead of looking at the total outcomes, they analyze additional benefits and additional costs. Economic agents will compare marginal benefit with marginal cost before making any decision. This approach allows economists to explain behavior in a more precise and realistic way. The second one is rational economic behavior. Marginalists assume that individuals behave rationally and purposefully. Consumers aim to maximize their utility while firms aim to maximize their profit. All decisions are made by logically comparing costs and benefits. However, these decisions are also subject to constraints such as income, time, and available resources. Next, microeconomics emphasis. The marginalist approach focuses on microeconomics, which studies individual units in the economy. This includes consumers, firms, and specific markets. Instead of analyzing the whole economy, marginalists focus on smaller units. This helps to better understand detailed decision-making and market behavior. Next, use of abstract and deductive methods. Marginalists use abstract and deductive methods in their analysis. They begin with assumptions and then use logical reasoning to reach conclusions. They also apply the concept of ceteris paribus, where other factors are held constant. This approach simplifies complex real-world situations, making them easier to analyze. The next one is pure computation emphasis. Marginalists often assume a perfectly competitive market structure. This means there are many buyers and sellers, and products are homogeneous. No single individual or firm has the power to influence prices. As a result, the market operates efficiently and resources are allocated optimally. Demand-oriented price theory. In marginalist theory, demand plays a major role in determining price. This is different from classical economists who focus more on supply. Price is influenced by consumers' preference and marginal utility. Later, the neoclassical approach combines both demand and supply in price determination. Next, emphasis on subjective utility. Marginalists emphasize that value is based on subjective utility. This means the satisfaction gained from a good varies from person to person. They introduce the concept of marginal utility, which is the additional satisfaction from consuming one more unit. As consumption increases, marginal utility usually decreases. Next, equilibrium approach. Marginalists believe that the economy tends towards equilibrium. Equilibrium is a situation where supply equals to demand. If there is any disturbance, market forces will adjust to restore balance. This concept helps explain how prices and quantities stabilize in the market. Merge of land with capital goods. In marginalist theory, land is no longer treated as a separate factor of production. Instead, it is grouped together with capital as property resources. Both generate returns such as rent, interest, and profit. This approach simplifies the analysis of production and income distribution. The last one is minimal government involvement. Finally, the marginalists support minimal government involvement in the economy. They believe that in laissez-faire, where market function is efficiently on their own.
Hi everyone, my name is Arvind Analaki Kamalanathan, metric number 307401. So today I'm here to give explanation about whom it benefit, validity and lasting contribution. First of all, the employers and the wealthy. For example, by defending market outcomes and opposing labor unions and government intervention, so the school provided an intellectual defense for the existing social order against the socialist attacks. Then the public. It is the long term, whereby providing tools to improve resource allocation and market efficiency, the school benefited society at large through better economic management. So, why the school was valid? So, first of all, the scientific rigor. It moved economic toward a more objective and mathematical discipline, which is making it more professionalized. Besides solving classical failures, it provided a logical solution to the diamond water paradox and defined the inaccurate labor theory of value held by the classical economies. So, At last, the employers and the wealthy, and also the public people are the benefits for and the lasting contribution. Hi everyone. Last but not least, there are also the lasting contribution, which contain four types. First of all, the marginal analysis. It is used in every modern microeconomic cost. Example, marginalist cost and marginalist revenue. Next, the mathematical economics, which is the integration of a calculus and statistics into economic theory. Besides, the theory of the consumer. It is the concept like diminishing marginal utility and rational choice. At last, the market structure, which is the lasting model for monopoly, oligopoly, and also the competition. That's all from me. Thank you. Last,
Hi everyone, my name is Lim Yong Chun, matrix number 306295. So in next slide, I will introduce about William Stanley Jevons. So now we'll introduce about William Stanley Jevons. He was born in Liverpool, England in 1835. In early, he worked in Australia as an assayer before returning to England to continue his studies in economics. In later, he became a professor at Manchester and also at the University College London. Jevons was known for his contributions not only in economics but also in logic and statistics. One of his unique achievements was inventing a logic machine in 1870, which shows his strong interest in applying scientific methods to reasoning and analysis. He also made important contributions to index number and the history of the science. Unfortunately, he passed away at the age of 47 due to an accidental drowning. So his work later became a fundamental to the development of marginal utility theory and also the modern economics. So now let us look into the Jevons theory of value, which is the heart of his 1871 masterpiece, The Theory of Political Economy. As you can see, on the left is the classical school, led by the economists like Ricardo, believed that the value was determined by the labor. He said that the peers are valuable because people have to die for them. This meaning that the cost of production regulates the value. However, Jevons completely argued with this. He famously stated that the value depends entirely upon the utility. In Jevons' view, peers are not valuable because of the labor spent diving, rather than people are willing to die for them only because buyers derive utility from peers in the first place. So, does the labor still matter? The answer is yes, but only indirectly. Labor determines the supply, which then affects the final degree of utility and ultimately determines the market value. This shift from cost to utility is exactly what we call the marginal revolution. Next, I will discuss the law of diminishing marginal utility. So looking at the figure on the right, Jevons illustrates the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. In the upper graph, total utility increases as more of a good is consumed, but it also increasing at a diminishing rate. The lower graph shows the marginal utility, which Jevons famously termed as the final degree of utility. The relationship is clear as long as TU is increasing, MU remains positive. When TU reaches its maximum, MU becomes zero, and if consumption continues beyond that, MU becomes negative. Jevons said that utility cannot be measured directly but can only be estimated by observing human behavior and preference. This law provides the scientific solution to the water diamond paradox. He said that water is abundant, so even though its total utility is high, its marginal utility is very low. Diamonds are rare, therefore their marginal utility remains very high, making them more valuable at the margin. So lastly, this proof Jevons points that value is determined by the utility of the last unit consumed, not the total supply. Now let us look at how Jevons formalized the rational choices and the theory of exchange. So on the left, we have the equimarginal rule. Jevons argued that a rational consumer maximizes utility by ensuring the last dollar spent on every good gives an equal amount of marginal utility. As the formula in the box, if the utility per dollar of good X is higher than good Y, the consumer will buy more X and less Y. This shift continues until the ratios equalize, achieving the maximum total utility. And on the right, Jevons applied this to the theory of exchange. He said that trade happens because both parties value the other person's good more than what they currently have. For example, if party Y only have beef and party B only has corn, they will trade until the marginal utility gains are exhausted. A specific example from the textbook: if a steak costs £10 and the corn costs £1, exchange will reach equilibrium when the steak provides exactly 10 times the marginal utility of the corn. At this point, the ratio of marginal utilities match the ratio of prices and the exchange ceases. So finally, let's talk about Jevons on labor, which directly challenged the classical view. Jevons has stated that labor is essentially variable, so that its value must be determined by the value of the produce, not by the labor itself. So firstly is the labor as pain. Jevons redefined that labor as a subjective and psychological painful transaction. He argued that the problem of economics is to satisfy our human wants with the least possible amount of labor. Secondly is the optimal work point. To find the perfect balance, a worker must compare the pleasure of earnings against the pain of work. So let us refer to the figure 13.2 on the right side. The worker reach their optimal work point at point M. At this equilibrium, the marginal utility of earnings is exactly equal to the marginal disutility of work. So beyond this point, the pain of additional work would overweight the pleasure of the extra income. So at last is the value determination. Value of labor is not determined by the labor hours. It is determined by the final degree of utility, or let's say marginal utility of the products. So in simple terms, it is the value of what you produce that determines the value of your labor. So this marking a complete shift away from the classical labor theory of value.
Hello, my name is Nur Ishirah binti Muhammad Nazir with matric number 304259. Now I will present the ideas and contribution of Francis White Edward. Francis White Edward was an economist from Ireland born in 1845. He attended Trinity College in Dublin, then studied at Oxford University and later became a professor of political economy at Oxford University. He is also well known for introducing mathematical methods into economics, which help make economic analysis more systematic and scientific. One of his most important work is Mathematical Physics, an article papers relating to political economy, where he introduced key concepts that are still used in modern macroeconomics. Among his contributions, three important ideas stand out. First, indifference curve, pricing behavior of oligopolies, and the difference between marginal product and average product. This idea helps us understand how individuals make choice, how they interact in markets, and how production works in firms. Next, let us look at the concept of indifference curve and exchange, which were introduced by Francis White Edward. Francis White Edward said an indifference curve represents different combination of two goods that give the same level of utility or satisfaction to an individual. This means the person is indifferent between those combinations because each combination provides equal benefits. So he used this concept to analyze exchange between individuals with well-known example, which is Robinson Crusoe and Friday. And in this example, Crusoe has money, which we label as X1, while Friday has label which we label as X2. And both individuals want what the other person has. and Crusoe wants more labor while Friday wants more money. Because of this, they have different preference. For example, Crusoe prefer point A because it gives him more labor, while Friday prefer point C because it gives him more money. And this create a conflict because both cannot achieve their preferred point at the same time. So according to Francis Y. Edward, they will engage in bargaining or negotiation, and through this process they will move away the indifference curve from points like A or C towards a point that benefits both of them. This set of possible agreement point is known as the contract curve, which is point D, formed by the tangency points of their indifference curve. And at point D, both invariably reach a higher level of satisfaction, and it's not possible to make one person better off without making the other person worse off. And however, Edward also explained that the final outcome is indeterminate, which means there's no single fixed price solution, and the exact point depends on the bargaining price of each individual. This shows how Edward used mathematical and graphical analysis to explain real-life economic interaction between the individual. Now we look at another important contribution by Francis Y. Edward, which is the difference between marginal product and average product. Marginal product or MP refers to the additional output produced when one more unit of labor is added, while average product or MP refers to the output per unit of labor. Francis Y. Edward explained that the relationship between this concept using the total product curve, which is TP. Marginal product can be understood as the slope of the total product curve. When total output is increasing at an increasing rate, marginal product is rising. However, when total output starts increasing at a decreasing rate, marginal product begins to fall. Eventually, total product reaches its maximum, and at this point, marginal product becomes zero. And this situation is explained by the law of diminishing returns, where adding more labor eventually leads to lower additional output. There's also an important relationship between marginal product and average product, which is MP and AP. When marginal product is greater than average product will increase. When marginal product is equal to average product reaches its maximum level. And when marginal product is less than average product will decrease. This concept is very important for firms because it helps them decide the optimal number of workers to employ.
Okay, so my name is Ratakma binti Muhammad. Metric number is 307534, and now I'm going to present one of the important economics Antoine Augustin Carnot. Carnot, born in Gray, France, published treatises on mathematics, philosophy, and economics. He's the first to apply mathematics to economics analysis and first to develop concise mathematical model of pure monopoly, duopoly, and pure computation. Developed the errorless complete model of the derailment for resource, forerunner to the marginalist school on the rates of change of total cost and revenue functions, contribution to economic analysis, theory of pure monopoly, and theory of duopoly. A firm can maximize its profit by setting a price at which marginal revenue equal marginal cost, MR equal MC. In graph A shows that MR below the AR because the lower price applies to all units, not just the extra one sold, and then the total profit will be maximized at the quantity of output when TR is greatest, where at this point MR equals 0. Each additional unit sold will add its own price to TR, but if extra unit had not been offered for sale, the price received on other units would have been higher. The loss of this potential revenue must be subtracted from the gain in revenue through the sale of extra unit. The seller could charge 100 francs per unit. However, he would sell only 65 liters. TR would be 6,500 francs, assuming TSTC equals 0. monopolists will try and error until the price settles at 16 francs. At 16 francs, buyers will purchase 200 units and the other will rise to 12,000 francs. This is the monopolist's maximum TR. At the monopolist's maximum TR, MR equal MC equal 0. Profit maximizing condition is fulfilled. At graph B, any price below or above 16 francs will reduce TR. Carnot extends his theory to the condition where MC are positive. According to him, the monopolist facing positive cost will maximize profit when TR minus DC at the level of output where MR equal MC. This rule applies in situations where numerous competitors exist.
So, in conclusion, the marginalist school fundamentally changed the development of economics. It shifted economics from a mainly philosophical discussion about labor and wealth into a more systematic and analytical discipline focused on how scarce resources are allocated. So, by introducing the concept of subjective utility, the marginalists were able to explain how value is determined by the marginal utility of the last unit consumed. This also helped solve the important classical economics problems, especially the diamond water paradox. Most importantly, the school laid the foundation of modern microeconomics. Concepts such as marginal cost, diminishing marginal utility, and price theory are still widely used in economic analysis today. Therefore, the marginalist school remains one of the most influential movements in the history of economic thought. So that's all for our group. Thank you.